Passport bros. What the heck is a passport bro? What are they and what are Christian men to make of such an idea? Let me tell you a little story. Back in 2005, I met the love of my life. He was tall, incredibly handsome, and I knew from the moment I laid eyes on him that he was the one for me. There was this one small little problem though. Upon getting to know him and learning more about him, I discovered that he was an avid traveler and he is what's now considered a passport bro. Now, before your mind starts going on some crazy tangent and making wild assumptions, this show is not about what you think it's about. We're not going to discuss what you think happens when men travel abroad. I, for one, am a Christian, so pump your brakes. This is not that kind of content. However, what you do need to know is that in 2007, after a year and some months courtship, my then fiance and we wed in a small courthouse ceremony, immediately started our family, and we have been happily married ever since. Yes, I married what many would consider a passport bro. Now, this video is not about what many people think happens in these faraway lands that have American men rushing to get a passport, heading on the next flight smoking. Nope. This show is not going to be about that. This show is going to be about how American men have been for years. This is not a new phenomenon. They have for years been traveling outside of the United States in search of what every man of every ethnicity wants. What is that? Peace, femininity, cooperation, submissiveness, and to be with someone who was raised to be a wife. So sit back, grab your favorite beverage, and we're going to get into it because, men, I understand exactly what's at work here because I lived it. And ladies, y'all gonna have to lean in for this one. Here is a hard truth. If y'all don't do something different and completely change course, I cannot in good faith, even if you are a believer, and I'm saying this with as much sincerity as I can muster up. I cannot in good faith just tell you that everything's going to be okay, right? So, here's the deal. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about all of that and more on the Standard of Truth podcast. Well, hello, everybody. Grace and peace to you from God our Father and the Lord Jesus Christ. Happy Saturday. Listen, what we're talking about today is a completely unique perspective, right? As I told you in my soft opening monologue, I actually married a former passport bro, right? And what you need to know about that is a lot of things. Is one, he's my husband and he's still my husband, right? But I need to tell you a little bit about what happened with that, why it's important, why I have a vested interest in this topic. And we're just going to discuss some hard truths. So, this live stream is going to serve to do two purposes. One, it's going to dispel some myths, right? Two, it's also going to be from a biblical perspective. I am a Christian. I create distinctively Christian content. However, I can speak to the culture because this issue or alleged problem that many seem to have with this phenomenon known as passport bros needs to be discussed. And I don't believe that believers need to be on the sidelines and say, well, this is not our conversation. Ladies, I'm telling you, it is your conversation. And if you didn't think it was your conversation, it's your conversation tonight. So if you are a man or a woman, regardless of what end of the binary spectrum you fall on, you need to tune in to this show. So, First thing I want to do is I want to let you guys know this is going to be a rough one, right? It's going to be a rough one because I'm going to expose what men have been saying for years. If you're new and you're like, April, what is a passport, bro? There are lots of myths circulating around this term. There's actually a hashtag that's been trending for a while. Well, if you don't know, I've been married 15 years, right? So that means my husband and I got married in 2007 and I met him in 2005. And I don't know if the term was a thing back then, but the concept was definitely a thing. It wasn't as popular as it is now. And I've talked with my husband ad nauseum about this. We actually planned this show and we were very thoughtful and very careful. I'm going to share a little bit about our story because I believe God is getting glory out of our story, but this is gonna free some women today. Because you guys need to hear from a woman's perspective, um, what men are actually saying. And I believe men also need to hear from a woman's perspective, the biblical basis for the claims that I'm going to make tonight. So share the video so you can get some people in here. And we're gonna go ahead and talk about it. So like I said, I've been married for 15 years. And what many people don't know, I did not meet my husband abroad. Like I met him here in Metro Atlanta, at a little supper club on a little Wednesday night happy hour. And I remember that day like it was the back of my hand. If anybody knows me, everybody knows I love my husband like a diabetic loves carbs. Okay. Like one thing you know about diabetics, they are always thirsty, right? And they are constantly craving carbs. Listen, nothing but death can keep me from that man. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart to the depths of my soul. What is so unique about our story? Well, when my husband and I met, it was just a casual, I'm sitting, mind you, I was an unbeliever, but I'm sitting at the bar, with a girlfriend, and I see this guy, and I'm like, oh Lord, Jesus, yes, thank you. Thank you, because that's him, right? I knew immediately from the moment I laid eyes on him that he was the one. It wasn't no supernatural. I felt it in my spirit. I just saw him and I was like, that's it. Like the search is over. Like we're done. I'm hanging it up because he's the one. I did a little wave. Gave him the signal. He comes over and we start talking, so forth and so on. And I'll never forget, um, on our first date, just getting to know each other. And he's telling me how he loves to travel and how he had just started a new job, but he's still working his old job. And I'm like, okay, well, I know you were telling me that you work for the airline, right? So put a pin in that. So he's working for the airline. And anybody who knows when you work for the airline, you get travel benefits. You get to travel for deeply discounted rates. For the most part, you're traveling for free. You're only paying like incidental taxes and some other things. I don't know, all of the proper term for it, but he was very open and transparent and honest. And so I'm like, well, I'm 25, y'all, at the time. I'm 25 years old. So call it naivete. I don't know. But I'm like, oh, tell me about your excursions. Like, I want to know all about it, just in my young little, wet behind the ears kind of way. And my husband's 11 years older than me. So there is an age gap, but he's telling me like, yeah, I've been, I have my other job, but I'm still working for the airline. And he was just like, yeah, I travel all over the world. One weekend I might be in Thailand, another weekend I might be in Brazil. I love Dominican Republic. And, in the course of us getting to know each other, he's telling me about the culture over there. He's telling me about the food. But please believe we had a very candid and open discussion about prospects of relationships and how women over there are just team different than the women over here. Now, when he's telling me all this, I'm ear hustling. I am paying attention because what did I already tell y'all? I told y'all when I seen him across the room that he was the one. So I already knew. I was like, listen, y'all can call me what you want, pick me, whatever. Yes, I wanted to be picked, and I wanted to be picked by him. And so there was no strategic plan for me, to be a certain way. But what I did was I was very intentional and I was paying attention and I was listening to the way he would talk about his travels over there. And I did not put a plan in place to say, "Oh, okay, well I'm just going to compete." It wasn't a discussion that I had within myself. All I knew is that I said, if this is the guy that I want to be with, and he is traveling abroad, that means it's not just women in Atlanta that I'm competing with. I'm competing on an international level, and I got to come with it. Okay? So I'll never forget, we're getting to know each other. A couple of weeks passed. And, I was like, hey, well, what are you doing over the weekend? Maybe we should, catch up. And he was like, well, you know what? I had this trip planned and I've had it planned for weeks and I, really didn't want to cancel. I'm going, I can't remember if he was going to DR or Brazil, but he was like, I'll see you when I get back. So I'm like, okay, no big deal. And I'll never forget, I drove him to the airport, and when you work for the airlines, you have to be all dressed up. And I was like, oh my Lord, this man looks so good. I was like, why is he get on a plane? So I drop him off. He's looking like really nice because you have to dress up. We say our goodbyes. Mind you, we're not in a relationship. Like, we just get to know each other. I am not his girlfriend. We are not exclusive. But I remember when he got back and he tells me, he's like, you know what? I quit. And I'm like, you quit your job? He was like, yeah, I quit the airline. I really don't need that job. He was like, I was just kind of holding on to it for the traveling benefits. But he was like, I quit. I was like, okay, not thinking anything of it. And we just start our courtship and we're just doing us. Y'all, we've been stuck at the hip ever since. Why am I telling you that story? I'm telling you that story because it matters. I did not know what I did not know back then, but I knew enough to know that no man unregenerate in his unregenerate, unbelieving state is going to quit a job where he is getting free travel benefits, where he can go anywhere in the world to find his woman. No man is going to give that up unless he got a good reason to do so. And that's what we're going to discuss today. We're going to discuss the phenomenon of passport bros. So I got some slides. Y'all know, in true standard of truth fashion, I have my slides because we're going in deep. I got to lay the foundation and give you some definitions to make it clear that you understand what we're discussing and what we're not. So let me go ahead and cue those up. And right now, I'm on the wrong page, right? Like, so let's go ahead and get that started. Presentation's all messed up, but it's fine. Passport Bros, the truth. That's what I have entitled this presentation because there are so many myths surrounding this phenomenon. And y'all, this phenomenon is not new. I just told y'all I've been married 15 years. So this was actually 17 years ago. I met him in 2005. We married in 2007. When I say this is so old, the women on social media who are up in a tizzy, having a heart attack over this phenomenon, y'all late. Okay, y'all are super late because this is not new. It wasn't even new when I discovered that the man who I wanted to be with was essentially a passport bro. It wasn't new then. It's been happening for a while. The issue is y'all just ain't been listening, right? So this phenomenon known as passport bros is actually a hashtag. It's called hashtag passport bros. So the hashtag actually began as a way for Black men to advise other Black men where they could find traditional women in other countries. A simple search of passport bros on any social media platform will show hundreds of men describing their experiences with the opposite sex in other countries compared to the United States. So that's just giving you a little context where the hashtag came from. But the question we need to ask ourselves is why are Black men getting passports? Like, why is there apparently, on to what it seems to this generation, like there's this surge in men rushing to get these passports? Well, an argument can be made that what's driving the passport bros phenomenon or the movement is sexual immorality. Like, we can build a case about that, but I'm going to disagree and push back on that. And it's because women here in the United States are just they just giving scattered behind all over the place, and I'm not talking about Christian women, well, people who profess the name of Christ. Fake Christians are actually doing it too, but they're already actively participating in that. And so much so that there are most women, believe it or not, statistically have higher body counts than their male counterparts, right? So I don't even think that it makes sense to have the discussion that what's driving this movement is sexual immorality, because it's already happening here anyway. Women, particularly modern women, don't really have standards or requirements when it comes to that area. Like, if you scour social media and you pay attention to what's going on in the culture, gone are the days of, I'm not trying to do that. Everybody is Netflixing and chilling, right? With no strings attached. Like, they're not even dating. They're swiping left, swiping right. Next thing you know, they at the crib. They don't even know this person's last name. It's just moral. It's just morally debased. So we don't need to have a discussion about that, because that's happening domestically, right? But I don't know if I can move myself over to the side, y'all, but I can't even read. I'm gonna have to put myself here at the bottom for a quick second. Make this a little smaller. But what men want and have always wanted through all of antiquity, y'all, it's real simple. It is so simple. Men want respect, right? They want respect, and they want a traditional woman who knows what it means to be a wife. They want to know that there's a fundamental understanding that, oh, you want to get married? Great. There's a role, right? A position that's played when you're saying, I want to be married, I want a husband, I want to be a wife. Men through all of antiquity have always wanted the same thing. They're pretty consistent. They don't really switch things up too much, right? So, with that being said, let's go ahead and dispel some passport myths, right? There is a segment of the female population that, they don't really know much about this phenomenon. They've not really engaged in any meaningful dialogue with these men who are endeavoring to, like, I'm getting a passport and I'm out, right? They haven't talked with these men, but these are some of the myths that are circulating around, and a lot of them are assumptions. I'm not saying there isn't any truth to some of this, but in the context in which I'm discussing passport bros, a lot of these are myths. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them. And the first one I wanted to discuss is that these men are predatory, right? The myth is that these men are traveling abroad for cheap sex and to get young, impoverished girls. Now, I would argue that that's happening here domestically. Those are called predators, right? That they're actually engaging in illicit sexual immorality for the sole purposes of, gratifying themselves. An argument can be made for that, but this is specifically a myth that is surrounding the passport bro movement that I believe needs to be dispelled, because I'm like, y'all, it's really not that. Y'all can keep saying it, but until you've spent time with these men and you've engaged with the women over there and you understand the culture, something we're going to talk about, it's really it's actually really disparaging to say such a thing, because I'm like, well, wait a minute. This is somebody that you're interested in, you want to date, and when you find out he's traveling internationally, now he's a predator. Like, that's really messed up, right? You also hear this myth where, women will say, "Oh, well, he's too weak to handle a strong woman." Men are too weak to handle strong, independent women who challenge them and they want someone they can control. The first problem with that myth, it it presupposes the idea that w- w- when you say handle, like I start thinking cattle, right? I start thinking pets. I start thinking a fast race car with I don't know, some serious horsepower. Like it's not that. Men, if a man has to handle you, something's wrong. I mean, I'm just saying it's the whole strong, independent woman thing. That's part of the problem, and we're going to talk about that. But it's a myth that men are just too weak because they don't want to handle you. No, they really just don't want to deal with you. Like you are team too much. It is you are insufferable to deal with, and they're not weak. In fact, they're looking out for their peace of mind and their sanity because they're like, I'm not doing this with you. I've got options, right? And so that's not it. That is not that is another myth I want to dispel. This other myth is that traditional women, they're going over there because they want traditional women, but they don't want the marriage commitment, right? They're saying that men are going to Brazil and the Dominican Republic and Thailand to pursue these women with no intentions on marriage. And that is just simply not true. If we look at the statistics in this country, over 50% of Black men are single and childless. And when you talk to them, at the core of their being, they're like, you know what? I really do want to get married. I actually wanted a family, but I don't see any hope on the horizon. So, I mean, if it happens, it happens. But they're not going over there just because they just want these traditional women, but they're not going to commit. They actually want to commit. And then when you look at the statistics of our divorce rates in this country, 80% of divorces are filed by women. So these men are entering into these covenant relationships with these women, but they're not the ones breaking up their homes. It's the women that are doing it. So I am pushing back on this myth that, oh, these men are just going over there because they love these traditional women, but they're not serious. They're not taking them serious. Please believe it. Many, first of all, the men that are independently wealthy that can afford it, they're literally picking up and starting new lives over there, start whole families. And then the ones who are like, I'm going down there. I have a particular purpose in mind. I'm going to find me a wife, and then I'm bringing her back here and we're getting married and we're starting our life. I know these men. Okay? I know them, and it's a real thing. They actually desire marriage. Here's what I'm not saying. I am not saying that there's not a percentage of, like, there's not some outlier out there where they're like, I don't want to get married. I just want to have fun. That's there, that's here, that's everywhere. I am talking about, for the context of this conversation, this is a huge myth because by and large, the majority, most men want to carry on their progeny. They want a wife. They want children. They want family in the traditional sense. They don't want to be your baby daddy. They actually want something solid to build and to propagate, like I said, their progeny. They want a junior or a little girl. Like they want some kids. They do. Even when they're after 55, I know men are like, yeah, I would. At this age, at this juncture, I would probably do it. That's telling you something. The other myth that I want to dispel is the colorism myth. There's a myth that's saying that men are looking for these exotic women because they're color struck and they hate themselves. What we need to understand is that, particularly in South America was colonized by Africans just like the United States was, right? These women cover the spectrum of colors, okay? And if you know anything about Black men and you talk to most Black men want to be with someone who shares their ethnic reflection. right? But they're at a point now where they're like, I don't even care. I just want some peace. Like I don't want to deal with the headache. And so colorism, it's a myth because the women over there are all colors of the rainbow, right? They're lighter than me, they're my colors. Some of them are deep, beautiful, dark chocolate brown. They're black women. They are of Afrocentric ethnicity. So it's not that they hate themselves. Like it's silly. What instead of us engaging with what these men are saying, engaging with the argument, it's easy for us to discuss and say these myths. Maybe it makes you feel better. I don't know. But we're gonna deal with what the real issue is, why they're going to international spaces in order to find what they want. So let's move on. The biggest issue and the biggest chief complaint that these men have is that it's culture, right? You can find any of these groups of men that are traveling internationally and they will tell you it's the culture. It's a cultural difference. It is so distinct and such a sharp contrast that they're like, I didn't even realize that there were places like this that actually had these cultural values. So, what I want to do now is I actually want to define culture, right? So, culture it's an umbrella term which encompasses the collective social behavior, institutions, and norms found in human societies, which includes the collective knowledge, belief, arts, laws, customs, capabilities, and habits of the individuals in these groups. It's culture. I know right now I'm talking to the women. I know you and your girlfriends have a really difficult time thinking that it's culture, right? You're thinking it's something else. Oh, it's got to be their hair, right? Oh, it's got to be, the bodies. Or it's got to be, their skin tone or they're docile and you can just do what you want and they can be a little play. Listen, you can keep having that conversation amongst yourselves. You can do that. You are free to do that. But I'm telling you what I know. I am married to a former passport bro, okay? It's culture. It is culture. It is culture. Americans have a culture, and particularly Black Americans. I don't know whose culture we've adopted, but we've got a culture, right? I can't pinpoint what it is, and we're going to talk about it, but I'm going to talk about the broad American culture, and then we're going to compare that with the culture. I can't span the entire globe. We're going to focus specifically on South American culture, right? We're going to do that. Before I continue, let me just make sure I have not missed. Okay, no, I haven't missed anything. We're good to go. Y'all still with me? Y'all still out there? If you're still with me and y'all hanging on, y'all just put a one in the chat if y'all still here. So let's go ahead and compare. Well, before we compare, let's discuss American culture, right? American culture, mind you, I speak in generalities. I don't want to hear, but that's not me, and I don't know people like that. We ain't talking about you. We know you don't have problems, right? It's everybody else. I'm speaking of American culture in general. Whether you white, black, you born here in America and you've adopted the Western way of living. I'm talking about American culture. American culture is very individualistic, right? It is traditional families or traditional nuclear families are not really a thing anymore. You don't really see them as often. You guys know the statistics in the Black community. Our single mother rate is incredibly high. It's just not good. Followed by our Hispanic women, followed by our Caucasian brethren. Like everybody's numbers are not doing well right now, but Black women, our families in particular, are in crisis. You don't have to believe me. Just look around you and you can see that. There's no family loyalty, no emphasis. It's heavy emphasis on just me, myself and I. There's no duty, there's no loyalty, there's no familiar pride, right? Right now, I don't know how it got that way. I've got, some anecdotal theories, but in general, this is American culture in comparison to other cultures around the world. American culture, particularly in the last, I would say 7 to 10 years, zero respect for men. There's a heavy misandrous ideology that seems to permeate our culture. You see it in our movies, you see it in our sitcoms. Men are just the bumbling idiots. There's no value in a man. Now, he's important as a resource or as a line item, on a tax return, but outside of that, he's something to be consumed for financial and physical gratification. And if he can't bring a huge wallet, then he's not useful to anyone. That is the prevailing thought amongst many people here in the West. And yes, I'm going to say it. Black women, not you, and certainly not my tightest two women, but in general, you know a woman who thinks just like this. If he ain't coming with the bag, like I don't know, he has to make as much as me or higher. Like, I mean, if he's not making at least where I am, then I mean, I'm just not gonna be able to do it. Or you hear, I don't date anybody unless they have a master's or higher. I mean, I have a master's, so it's just it would make sense for me to only date someone with a master's or higher because I mean, what do we have in common? What would we talk about? What would we discuss? Like, these are the conversations that are happening out here in the culture. Don't act like you ain't heard it, and don't act like I'm making this up because I'm not. I'm not. Um, our women, college age women, they're not interested in their peers coming out of college with them. They're like, okay, well, I'm 22, but why aren't you making six figures and you're 22 like me? Like, no, they're not making six figures, but this heavy materialistic focusing on the money is a thing. It is now a part of the culture. You see it everywhere. You got to get the bag. You have to, we're chasing all these degrees and you can't just get one. One is not enough. You got to get at least two or three. At least two or three. And then these pursuits are placed above the importance of what about the man? Well, what about the man? Like, I mean, I can do it. Why can't he? Like, come on, y'all know what I'm talking about. You don't like to hear it, but that don't make it any less true. No clear and distinct gender roles. Everybody knows that this is now indicative of culture here in this country. Why? Because I mean, gender is a social construct now. Just like, well, I mean, men can menstruate, but it's not even that. American Black women in particular, we're not raised by and large to be a wife. And that is not a put down. I have to put myself in that same category. Love my mama. She was an amazing mother, right? But we did not have thoughtful, pensive, specific conversations about being a wife. We did not have those conversations. We just didn't. And I know I am not alone. I had to learn by way of books, um, older women speaking into my life, the scriptures, right? When I became born again, my thinking was reoriented to be like, oh, I'm a wife now, right? So this is what I must be. By and large, we're not raised that way. A lot of us are doing on the job training because in our culture, we are not raised to prioritize it. So those conversations don't happen. It's after high school What school are you going to? And then after you're in college, well, where are you going to work? And it's all, we have constant conversations about educational and career pursuits. But the moment I can't even say the moment the discussion comes up, it rarely ever comes up about, well, when you gonna get married, when you gonna start like, I even know here in the West, children of two-parent households where the parents are actually discouraging and telling the girl, you don't have time to be thinking about marriage and children. They actually are giving this advice so that the daughter is just like, oh, okay, well, if you're telling me I don't have time for that, I'm not going to prioritize it, and I'm pursuing all these other things. That is a reality. It's indicative of our culture because we're very individualistic. It's no longer let's let's build a family and start with that foundation and go from there. These conversations are just not happening. We are prioritizing, like I said here, education and careers at the expense of family. And many of us, it has happened and it's just too late because we're like, oh my goodness, we're waking up. And then we realize that, oops, I forgot to prioritize this aspect of my life. No one told us that, this is a time sensitive issue. You kind of need to do this and the other stuff simultaneously. You can't segment your life because at some point your body is going to tell you that shelf life is waning, right? I want to be gracious and as much as I can, but someone has to have the conversation with our young girls, and someone also, we need to be honest with ourselves and be like, you know what, I wasn't taught this either. Like, don't remember having that conversation. We just didn't. It's indicative of American culture. But let's contrast that with other cultures, particularly cultures in South America, right? These other cultures in South America are more collective. They are more strong family, nuclear family oriented, right? Family loyalty, emphasis on family values, low out of wedlock rates. Why? Is because there is a sense of shame and stigma attached to doing things out of order versus in our culture, we do what we want all willy-nilly, do stuff all out of order, and we believe, oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It's no big deal. Like, so what? I don't need the man. I just wanted the baby, right? We do that. But in these other cultures, there's a sense of, dare I say it, patriarchal. I I'll go as far as to say biblical values in the sense. I am not saying they're Christian values, but they're borrowing they're borrowing from the Christian worldview in terms of foundational order in the family structure. And there's still a stigma of shame attached to it when you don't do it that way because it's their culture. It's what they know. The thought of just, oh, I'm gonna just have a kid, and it's like, well, where's the man? That those things don't happen like that. And then when they do, there's the shame where you should feel some reproach because it's like, oh my goodness, I'm letting the family down. It's not supposed to be this way. I'm actually, bringing reproach on the family name. It's culture. Let's continue. Respect for men. These cultures are very patriarchal. I don't care what the left is trying to tell you, that women rule the world and that equality and feminism is the wave of the future. Other parts of the world are like, y'all over there in America, y'all got us messed up because we don't live like that. They don't. They're like, we're not buying what y'all are selling. Y'all go ahead and tear up and destroy your country with that feminist foolishness. But over here in Africa, in South America, they're like, no, we like the patriarchy because it works, right? Men are not, in these other places, men are just not resources to be consumed and used, right? They actually have intrinsic value and they're treated as such. Men are respected not because they make a lot of money, not because they have a lot of prestige. They're simply respected because they're men. They're men. And the idea of having a man as the head of the family to look to for wisdom and guidance has value. And the women there understand that. So they cherish that. They respect that. They don't want to usurp that. They're perfectly okay resting in their femininity because they're like, we have a man here. And that man is going to lead and guide and give us wisdom and protect and provide. And when I say provide, I even need when I'm discussing provision in the American context, I even have to qualify that. What do I mean? Because in the American context, provide means you got to get me Louboutins, buy me a Benz, make sure I'm in a 7-bedroom house, and I'm looking fly with my nails done and my hair done all the time. In the American context, that's provision. Not for all of us, but for a large segment of the population. When you say provide, that's what they hear. They take that word, filter it through their own worldview, and that's the output. The output is, oh, provide. Yes, I'm living La Vida Loca, right? We're on vacations in Maldives and, I'm driving, a luxury vehicle every few years and I'm going on girls' trips at your expense. That's what modern women today in the American context hear when they hear provide. Their context of provision is different. Provision is, oh, do we have a place to live? Do we have food to eat? Right? Are we safe? Are we together? Do I have everything that I need to live this life, right? With my basic needs taken care of. And they're not just like, oh, my basic needs are taken care of. This is a miserable life. No, no, no. They are happy. They have joy because they're like, he's providing. Our values here in America in the West are just jacked up and they're skewed. And how it got like this, particularly, I'm a Christian, right? So when I talk about this, I know so many of my all of my subscribers here, you guys in the chat that are believers. I know y'all are like, well, why is she? If we're the her audience, why is she saying this to us? You know why? Because we see this among Christian women too. We have not been immune to the influence of this world system. I know what I'm talking about. I've had these conversations with my godly Christian girlfriends, and we're sitting here trying to figure out, I mean, why is it that, we're not content, right? I saw my girlfriend Shanice in the live chat, right? We talk about this all the time. We're just like, where did these Christian women get this idea that they have to have what everybody else has to be happy? What happened to the biblical concept of being content with what you have, working quietly with your hands, living a peaceful and quiet life, not coveting, right? Coveting is wanting what everybody else has. That's the whole idea of keeping up with the Joneses. This adoption of this worldview, what it has done is it has placed an undue heavy burden on men. So the pressure to provide you with the life that you've never lived. You wasn't providing it for yourself. You ain't never seen nobody in your family live this life. But for some reason you have it set in your mind that I'm supposed to live a certain way because Sarah Jakes told me that I was the head and not the tail. Keep listening to these false teachers who got you constantly chasing the bag and your destiny, which includes things that have no eternal value and that are causing you to be discontent with this very present world, with the stuff that you can't even take with you.